I never thought of myself as a paranoid man. If anything, I was the guy who laughed off relationship horror stories. The one who trusted blindly because I believed love was built on faith, not fear. But looking back, I realized that blind trust was my biggest mistake. The first red flag was subtle, so small that I almost ignored it. Mila, my wife, had always been glued to her phone, like most people these days. But one evening, as I reached over to grab her phone from the counter, to hand it to her, she practically snatched it out of my grip. A forced smile followed, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sorry, babe. Work stuff. I let it slide. Why wouldn't I? She was a marketing manager, always dealing with late-night campaigns and emails. But then, over the next few weeks, more things started to add up. Her call log was always empty, not just selectively erased, completely wiped, as if no one had ever called her. Her messages, too, only contained generic texts from coworkers and family, nothing personal, nothing intimate. At first, I chalked it up to a privacy habit, something work-related. But then, one evening, as she showered, curiosity got the best of me. I picked up her phone, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. I wasn't the type to snoop, but something gnawed at me. Something primal and insistent. Password changed, my stomach dropped. Mila and I had always been open about our passwords. Not because we needed to check up on each other, but because it was convenient. But no, she was hiding something. I tried to ignore it, to push the doubt to the back of my mind, but it festered like a wound. I began noticing her changing patterns, working late more often, sneaking out for coffee, runs during the weekends, dressing up a little more than usual, even on casual days. It was subtle, just enough to keep me second-guessing myself. Gaslighting at its finest. Then, the moment that changed everything, I was in our shared office, cleaning up the mess of bills and documents I had neglected for months. We had always kept our financials in a shared digital folder, easily accessible. But when I logged in, something was off. Her usual purchases, groceries, work expenses, the occasional splurge had been replaced with transactions I didn't recognize. Hotel bookings, Uber rides at odd hours, boutique purchases from stores I knew she never wore. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the mouse as I scrolled. There was a sinking realization creeping up my spine, a confirmation of something. I wasn't ready to face Mila, was covering her tracks. She had been erasing her phone history, changing her passwords, meticulously removing every trace of something she didn't want me to see. But she forgot about the money. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. I felt sick. Betrayal wasn't just a knife to the heart. It was a slow, agonizing poison that spread through every part of your body. My chest felt tight, my pulse erratic. I wanted to confront her immediately, demand the truth, scream, "Why are you doing this? Who is he?" But that wouldn't get me answers. Not yet. I needed proof. That night, as she lay next to me, her breathing even and peaceful, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of my discovery pressed on me, crushing, suffocating. I turned to look at her, the woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built a life with. And for the first time, she felt like a stranger. The next morning, I made my move. If she was hiding something, I was going to find it. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. I had already felt the shift in my gut. I just needed the evidence to match. And so, I set my trap. I woke up the next morning with a singular purpose. To find the truth. My mind raced through the possibilities of what Mila was hiding. But deep down, I already knew. I just needed to see it for myself. I had always believed that the worst kind of betrayal wasn't just the act itself but the deception, the layers of lies built to keep someone blind. And I had been blind long enough. My first move was to get into her phone. Changing her password had been her attempt at locking me out. But there was one thing she didn't know: our home security system saved every device password entered on our shared Wi-Fi network. It wasn't built for snooping, more for ensuring security in case of forgotten logins. I pulled up the system on my laptop, navigating through the logs, until I found the recent entries. There it was. A new 6-digit code, entered 2 weeks ago. I grabbed her phone from the nightstand while she was still asleep, typed it in, and held my breath. The screen unlocked instantly. My hands trembled as I navigated to her messages. At first glance, everything seemed normal: conversations with coworkers, reminders for appointments, a grocery list. But I knew better. I scrolled faster, looking for something, anything, that would confirm what I feared. Then I saw it. A contact named Liam, with a heart emoji next to it. My heart pounded as I opened the thread. The messages weren't long, but they were deliberate. "Miss you already. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Wish I could just wake up next to you instead." A deep, gut-wrenching pain twisted inside me. Mila had never been this affectionate over text with me, not even in the early days. It was intimate, raw, and worst of all, undeniable. I kept scrolling, and it only got worse. Photos, selfies, of her in a hotel room I didn't recognize, wearing lingerie I had never seen her buy, messages about their secret weekends together. Then, the part that made my blood run cold: he's starting to get suspicious. I've been extra careful, deleted everything after our calls. He doesn't have a clue. She was mocking me, laughing behind my back with this man while carefully erasing her tracks, but she underestimated me. She thought I wouldn't notice. But I had, and now, I was going to make sure she regretted every lie, every deception, every stolen moment she had given to someone else. I needed more proof. I checked her recent locations, nothing. She had been diligent in erasing her digital footprint, but there was one thing she couldn't erase: her car's GPS. I quietly slipped out of bed, grabbing my keys and heading to the garage. Her car was parked where it always was. I opened the driver's side, tapping into the built-in navigation history. As I suspected, she had been making frequent trips to a location downtown, a luxury apartment complex, Liam's place. I clenched my jaw, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Mila had been sneaking off to see him, using my trust as her cover. She had been careful, but not careful enough. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I had to be smarter than that. If she wanted to play games, I was about to show her that she had picked the wrong person to deceive. I got back inside, my mind racing with the next steps. I could have burst into the room right then, shaking her awake, demanding answers. But that would give her the chance to lie again, to twist the truth, to turn it back on me. No, I wanted her to feel what I felt. I wanted her to experience the humiliation, the gut-wrenching pain of knowing someone you love has betrayed you. That's when I made my decision. I was going to follow her. I would wait for her next move, pretend everything was normal, and catch her in the act. No more doubts, no more second-guessing. She had already buried our marriage the moment she chose him. Now, I was just here to watch the funeral. That evening I acted like nothing had changed. I kissed her goodbye as she left for her supposed work meeting, then tailed her from a distance as she drove downtown. My heart pounded as I watched her pull into the apartment complex. She didn't even hesitate. She knew exactly where she was going. I parked a block away, watching as she disappeared inside. I could have followed her up right then, but I needed her to be completely comfortable, unaware of what was coming. I waited for an hour, my mind running through every possible scenario. Then, finally, she re-emerged. This time, not alone. Liam, tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who exuded arrogance. He wrapped his arm around her waist, whispering something into her ear that made her laugh, the same laugh she used to have for me. I had seen enough. I grabbed my phone, snapped a few photos, and smiled bitterly. Mila had no idea her secret life was about to implode. I watched as they kissed, before she got into her car and drove away. My hands were steady now, no longer shaking with uncertainty. The anger had settled into something else reasonable. She thought she was careful, thought she had me fooled, but she forgot one thing. I wasn't the type to be played. And tomorrow, she would find out exactly why. The next morning, I woke up before Mila. I lay there for a moment, watching her, knowing she had no idea that everything was about to crumble around her. She stirred slightly, her hand reaching out instinctively to where I used to sleep, but I had shifted away just in time. I felt sick knowing that the same hands that reached for me had been all over him the night before. My chest burned with the knowledge that she had kissed him, whispered to him, laughed with him in ways I thought were only meant for me. But she was still playing the role of the devoted wife, pretending that nothing had changed. That was fine. I would play my role, too, until I was ready to make my move. I rolled out of bed, careful not to wake her, and went downstairs. I had already transferred all our joint accounts into a separate one under my name, just in case she decided to escalate things once the truth came out. I had also hired a private investigator, not because I needed more proof, no, I had enough to destroy her already, but because I wanted to know everything. Every little lie, every stolen moment, every betrayal. Mila thought she had been covering her tracks, but she had underestimated me. She thought erasing her call logs and clearing her messages was enough. What she didn't realize was that there were always breadcrumbs, and I had followed them all. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, waiting for the message from the investigator. It came through exactly at 8 a.m., a full report, complete with timestamps, locations, and photos. I scrolled through them, my fingers tightening with every new image. There was one of them in a restaurant, the same one she and I had gone to for our anniversary last year. Another of them in a hotel lobby, Mila's hand slipping into his as they walked toward the elevators. The final one, the one that sealed it all, was of them in his car, parked near our house, her body leaning into his as their lips met in a kiss. I exhaled slowly, my mind clear now. This wasn't just some fleeting affair. It was a carefully planned deception. She had made a fool out of me. Stolen moments from our marriage to give to him. I erased every trace so that I wouldn't find out. But now I knew, and I wasn't going to sit back and let her walk away from this unscathed. I heard footsteps upstairs. Mila was awake. I quickly closed the files and composed myself as she walked into the kitchen, stretching, yawning, as if this was just another ordinary morning. "Morning," she said, walking over to kiss me. I turned my head slightly so her lips landed on my cheek instead of my mouth. She frowned, but I saw her recover quickly, masking it with a small laugh. "Someone's grumpy this morning," she teased, forced a smile. "Just didn't sleep well," I lied. "Got a lot on my mind with work." She nodded. pouring herself coffee, completely unaware of what was coming. "I've got a long day today," she said casually, sipping from her mug. "Meeting with clients all afternoon. I probably won't be home until late." I knew exactly where she would be with him, in his apartment. The apartment I had been to last night, the one I had watched her walk into, laughing, carefree, believing she was invincible. I leaned back in my chair, watching her, measuring my words. "Maybe we should do something this weekend. Get away for a bit," I suggested. "We haven't had time together lately." She hesitated just for a second, so fast that most people wouldn't have noticed, but I did. "That sounds great," she said, forcing a smile. "Let's plan something." Liar. I watched as she moved around the kitchen, pretending to be the devoted wife, and I felt a strange sense of detachment. I had spent years loving this woman, believing in her, trusting her with everything. And now, as I looked at her, I realized I didn't even know who she was. I let her leave as planned, pretending I had meetings all day. The second she walked out the door, I grabbed my keys and followed. She drove straight to his place. Just as I knew she would, I waited outside, watching, my pulse steady. There was no more heartbreak, no more disbelief. Just a quiet, simmering fury. I watched her enter his building, and I knew she had no idea that her entire world was about to collapse. I gave it an hour before I made my move. I walked into the lobby, cool and composed, and approached the front desk. "Hey," I said, giving the receptionist a polite smile. "I'm supposed to meet my wife here, but I think she forgot to text me the apartment number. She just got here a little while ago. Her name's Mila." The receptionist barely hesitated. "Oh yes, she just went up to 6B. I thanked her and walked toward the elevators, pressing the button with a calmness I didn't truly feel. When the doors opened, I stepped inside, watching the numbers climb. When I reached the 6th floor, I walked straight to 6B and knocked. There was a pause, then shuffling. I imagined them exchanging panicked looks, trying to figure out if they should open. Door then finally, it cracked open, and Liam's face appeared. His expression dropped the second he saw me. "Hey," I said, my voice calm. "Mind if I come in?" He tried to shut the door, but I was faster. I pushed my way inside, and there she was, Mila, standing in the middle of the living room, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" She, STAMMERED. I pulled out my phone, tapping on the screen. "I thought you might want to hear something," I said, pressing play. Her voice filled the room. "Miss you already. Last night was amazing. Wish I could just wake up next to you instead." Her face crumpled as the messages continued to play, her own words condemning her. Liam took a step back, like he wanted to disappear. I turned to him. "Hope she was worth it," I said. "Because you can have her. She's your problem now." I looked at Mila one last time, taking in the woman I once loved, the woman who had shattered everything. Then, without another word, I walked out, feeling lighter than I had in months. She had spent all this time erasing her tracks, covering her secrets, making sure I would never find out. But in the end, it didn't matter, because the truth had a way of surfacing no matter how deep you tried to bury it. I didn't look back as I stepped out of the apartment. The sound of Mila's panicked voice calling after me faded the moment the door clicked shut. I wasn't interested in her excuses, her lies, or whatever desperate attempt she would make to manipulate the situation. I had heard enough, seen enough. There was no salvaging what she had broken. I took the elevator down in silence, my heart strangely steady, my hands no longer shaking with rage. I had expected to feel devastation in this moment, but there was only relief. Relief that I was done playing the fool. Relief that I had taken back control. Relief that she no longer had the power to hurt me. When I stepped out onto the street, I took a deep breath of cold air, feeling it fill my lungs like the first breath of freedom. I walked to my car and sat there for a moment, letting the weight of the morning settle. The last few months had been a slow, agonizing descent into a truth I hadn't wanted to accept. But now that I had reached the bottom, I felt oddly at peace. I wasn't naive. The hardest part was still ahead: the divorce, the legal battles, the fallout. But I was ready. She had spent so much time erasing her tracks, so sure she was untouchable, but she had underestimated me. She thought she had all the power, all the control, but I had flipped the script, and she never saw it coming. I pulled out my phone and sent the message I had prepared days ago. A single email to Mila's parents, my parents, and a few of our closest friends. No accusations, no bitterness. Just a simple statement. "I just wanted to let you all know that Mila and I will be separating. I discovered her ongoing affair and her continued deception, and I have decided to move on from this marriage. I appreciate your support and ask for privacy as I handle this transition." I attached the screenshots of her texts with Liam, nothing crude, just enough to make it clear. If she wanted to spin her own version of events, she would have to fight. Against her own words, I didn't wait for responses. Instead, I drove straight to my lawyer's office, where I had an appointment scheduled. He had already drafted the divorce papers. I just needed to sign them. Mila had no idea how fast this was going to move. By the time she crawled back to our house, sobbing, begging for another chance, it would already be done. I stepped into the office, shook my lawyer's hand, and signed my name at the bottom of the paperwork. Just like that, I was free. Home was different than the drive there. Lighter, I rolled down the windows. Let the wind rush through. Let the world feel new again. I had spent months suffocating under the weight of my suspicions, my heartbreak, my anger. But now that I had exposed the truth, I felt like I could finally breathe. When I pulled into the driveway, Mila's car was already there. Of course, she had rushed home. I could only imagine the frantic calls she had made, the desperate attempts to spin the situation in her favor. I walked inside and found her sitting at the kitchen table, her face streaked with tears. Her phone in her hands, she looked up at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Luca, please. I sent the divorce papers to your email." I interrupted, my voice calm, "Sign them. The sooner, the better." She flinched like I had slapped her. "You can't just throw away everything we built," she whispered. "Please, we can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You made your choice. I'm making mine," she broke then, sobbing, pleading, swearing it was a mistake. She told me she loved me, that she was lost, that she didn't know why she did it, that it was just a phase, a distraction, that it didn't mean anything, but it did. It meant everything. And it was too late. I let her cry. I let her break down, but I didn't waver. I had given her everything, my love, my trust, my devotion. And she had thrown it away for something fleeting, something meaningless. She had rewritten the rules of our marriage, without my consent, erased me from the life we had built together while still pretending to be my wife. And now, she had to live with the consequences. Eventually, the tears stopped. The desperation faded into quiet acceptance. She nodded slowly, swallowing back another sob. "I'll sign them," she murmured, "but I don't know how to live without you." I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me. And I realized something. I had spent so much time fearing what life would be like without her, but now that I was standing on the other side, I wasn't afraid at all. "You'll figure it out," I said. And then, I walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Mila was just another chapter in my life, one that had ended the moment I pressed play on that recording. And as I stepped out into the sunlight, feeling the warmth of a new beginning, I knew that the best part of my story was still ahead of me.